Welcome to this short tutorial on your group work assignment for international business. In the next couple of minutes, I will focus on where you actually can get data and also what is expected from you with respect to this assignment. So as I already mentioned in our last session, the group work consists of one big component, which is developing a market entry strategy, which obviously leads to the kind of recommendations you want to give to the company. As said before, you can actually choose what kind of company you want to consult as a consulting company, because your group will function as a consulting company. And you're also free to choose the country. Now, free to choose is probably too much to say, because there is one requirement, which is the company should not yet operate or sell products in a specific country that you look at. Of course, it's legitimate to actually pick a country that the country entered into in the past, but had to retreat again. And now, of course, you can reassess the country and the market to find out whether or not now would be a good idea or a good point in time to enter the market. And just quickly as a reminder, the length of your report corresponds to the number of people in your group. So each one of you should contribute approximately 2,000 words to the report. Now, this does not necessarily mean that everybody has to write the 2,000 words, but it should be equivalent to the amount of work that went into the report. After all, the group report will be judged based on the group performance and not on the individual contributions. I've also mentioned last time in our session that you probably want to use the SWOT analysis to actually collate information and categorize them and sort them accordingly. And you might remember that the SWOT analysis consists of 4 components, which can be categorized in 2 different parts of this analytical tool. The first one is the strengths and weaknesses, and the second one is opportunities and threats. Now, it's important to remember that the strengths and weaknesses are independent from the opportunities and threats. The strengths and weaknesses are particularly related to the company under investigation. So a company can have certain strengths and weaknesses that help to offset certain threats, or sometimes called risks, in a specific country or market. On the other hand, opportunities and threats are related to the country or the market or the industry that you look at. So you might find opportunities in a specific market, and you might find certain threats or risks in a certain country or market. And these opportunities and threats are, of course, independent from the company that you look at. So what types of data do you need? Of course, you need company data for the strengths and weaknesses. And you need country or industry data for the external analysis, what's happening outside the company for the strengths and weaknesses. So in terms of company data, you might draw on financial reports, the history of the company. You might look at the different product ranges. If you have a very big company with a huge product range, you probably also want to focus on a specific range of products and not look at all of them at the same time, because that would be way too much and would be way too time consuming for you to cover in this first term of your MSc program. You also want to collect information about the degree of internationalization, which basically means in how many different countries does this company already operate? Does it have any experiences in foreign countries? And you also want to collect a little bit more information about organizational culture, which very often is subsumed under terms like organizational vision, the mission of the organization, the philosophy of an organization, these kind of aspects. On the other hand, you have your country or industry data, which particularly looks at economic data, market data, data about competitors, which is of course very important, because if there are a lot of competitors in a specific market, then of course it's more risky and it would constitute a threat. And something that's of course very special for the MSc program and for my module in international business is that you do a cultural environment analysis too. So you probably want to understand what kind of culture do you find in your domestic country that you normally operate in compared to the country that you're going to? Are there any cultural specificities that you need to account for when trying to enter a new market. In order to combine the company data with the country data, you can use the SWOT analysis as explained before. So the company data would feed into the strengths and weaknesses, while the country and industry data would feed into the opportunities and threats part of the SWOT analysis. And based on the data that you've collected, and by looking at the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, you should be able to come up with meaningful recommendations. Now, an important question is, of course, where do I get all this data to fill these boxes in a SWOT analysis? Now, as far as company data goes, there are different websites that you can consult. Of course, you have company websites such as Unilever. You have stock exchanges. I've listed here the 3 most common ones, or the 3 largest ones, where you find a lot or most of the larger companies. And then there's also another database called Amadeus, which also offers a little bit more information about the companies themselves. Now, I always recommend to go for companies that are very well known and relatively large, because they tend to offer a lot of information about themselves. Something that's very important to mention here is I don't want you to struggle to find data, which is why I recommend to go for the more popular companies. What I want you to do, and you should be challenged with, is working with the data that you found, trying to combine them in meaningful ways, building your line of argumentation. This is something that's much more important for me to convey to you, that this is the challenge, this is the task. The challenge should not be to find the data. But of course, it's completely up to you what kind of company you want to choose. So if you want to choose a small company, that's perfectly fine. Just make sure that you get enough information to actually conduct a proper analysis. Something that I've very often get asked about company data is it possible to get in touch with the companies themselves? And by all means, please go ahead and give it a go and try to collect data from the companies themselves. You can, of course, get in touch with the company and ask them why did they not enter a specific country. Now, this is a great way of collecting first-hand information from the company itself, which in a real-life scenario you would actually do anyway. So let's have a quick look at a company website, because the other databases are very straightforward, but for company websites, it's of course depending on what kind of company you look at. So I know that Unilever has a great website in terms of company information. So if we click on the link provided in this slide, we come to the website of Unilever, and you instantly can see there is a section on company news, latest news for investors, share prices and whatnot. But more importantly, in particular for your report, might be this little tab here that says About Us. And you can find an introduction to Unilever, purpose and principles, Unilever Foundation, our history, our leadership, and so forth. So all different kinds of information that might be helpful in determining how this company operates and what kind of different cultural philosophies they might pursue. Now, something that I find is even more important than the About Us tab is the Investor Center. And since Unilever is listed on a stock exchange, they need to provide reports to their shareholders. And shareholders basically means to their owners. And here you can see all different kinds of reports that might be important. Most importantly, I think it's the annual report, because there they outline their strategies as well. So it's not only about accounting data, it's also about the different types of strategies, risks they face themselves or identified themselves, but also other information like regulatory news, understanding Unilever, and so forth. So it's a really great website that offers a lot of information. And many of the other companies that are of similar size will offer similar types of information. Okay, now let's have a look at where you can actually get data for the country and industry analysis that you have to perform. And there are basically at least 2 databases that I find tremendously helpful. The first one is Data Monitor 360. Data Monitor 360 offers country and industry reports, some of which actually already include a SWOT analysis. Now, this might come in very handy, but it's at the same time also very risky. Data Monitor is just one source of information. And of course, I would expect that in your report, you're not only relying on one source of information. So there is no problem in using a Data Monitor report about a country that includes a SWOT analysis, but you don't want to rely only on this information provided in this report. You want to draw on other information. And in that sense, it's kind of a good starting point and certainly a very valuable source of information to get some crucial facts down that you might need to make a final decision on the type of market entry strategy, or even more important, making the decision on whether or not the company should enter the market in the first place. Another very helpful and interesting database is the Global Market Information Database. This one has information about market shares, market size, consumer behavior to a large extent. So this is a great source if you know that there is a specific product that the company sells and you want to know who are the biggest competitors in this market for a certain product. And you get really very detailed information. This is also the database that I will look now into greater detail. So let's assume we have a very special question, namely, where do people drink more tea? In China or the UK? And a GMID can actually offer you information about where people drink more tea. So in order to do that, we actually go to the GMID database. Now, in order to access the database, you probably have to enter your username and password, in particular if you connect to the database outside the university off campus. Now, after clicking through all the different sections, you will end up with the landing screen of the GMID, which is this. And you might be very tempted to actually start off and click on industries, because here you can find all the different kinds of industries that are included in this database, from alcoholic drinks to beauty and personal care, health and wellness, hot drinks, tobacco, toys and games, and whatnot. However, a much more powerful way of selecting and filtering through the database is clicking on search. If you click on search, you can actually determine the category, in this case the industry, and you can also select the country that you want to look at in particular, or different countries if you want to have more than one. So in our case, it's actually China and the UK. So tea is normally a hot drink, so we go down the list to hot drinks, click on this little plus icon. Now we can choose from coffee, tea, and other hot drinks. And since we want to have tea, we just select it and move on to choose geographies. Now we want to have China, which is part of the Asian Pacific region, China. And then we want to go down and go to Western Europe and select the United Kingdom. And here we go. Now we've got as the category tea, and the geography summary gives us China and the United Kingdom. So all I need to do is click on run search, and suddenly we get a plethora of reports and data available to us. And you can see there's more than just market size, company shares, pricing, and whatnot. There are many different reports, all of which are related to hot drinks, or even particularly related to tea, different types of tea, and different regions such as China and the UK, which are the ones that we've chosen. So in our case, we want to know about the market size, because we want to know how many people do drink tea. So our market size is determined by the amount of people who drink tea. And now you have a nice table that actually shows you scores for different years. So you can actually look at and analyze the different developments of tea consumption, or in this case, the retail value of tea across different time periods. Now, this is very helpful because if you only look at 1 year, like the latest one, in this case 2013, you actually don't know whether there is an increase in demand for tea or a decrease in demand for tea. And this kind of trend, a positive trend, an increase in the demand for tea, of course yields different conclusions and different recommendations than a decrease in tea demand. So this is something that you definitely want to bear in mind. Now there's kind of a special issue now with the data that we have here, because the numbers, it's just retail value. And the problem with these numbers is that they are not comparable. It looks like there is a tremendous amount more tea sold in China than in the UK. But this is actually only partly true, because the scores for the retail value in China are in a different currency to those numbers provided for the United Kingdom. So to be more precise, actually for China we have Chinese yen, but for the United Kingdom scores, they are all in British pound. So what we need to do now is change the currency to actually be able to compare these numbers more properly. So if you go to this left-hand panel, you can actually choose from different categories, such as converting data, changing the time series, so you can actually go back further in time if you want to have a longer time scale. You can even change the type of data, change the categories, geographies afterwards. So for the moment, we just want to look at changing the currency. So we go to convert data, currency conversions. If we click on that, we actually can choose from different currencies. So we can, as we have currently visible, is the local currency. So we see the scores in terms of the currency of the country that we've selected. We could choose US dollars, euros, pound, and many other different currencies. Now, let's say we're a British company, so we want to choose pound because all the other scores might be in pound that we compare. And for your report, you probably want to stick, at least for each chart, with one specific currency. That makes much more sense. You have the option between a fixed exchange rate, whether you want to assume a fixed exchange rate or whether you want to consider fluctuations in exchange rates too. Now, I would say it's not a bad idea to account for fluctuations in exchange rates. So I click on this one. And now that the scores on in the table change tremendously. Now we have the retail value in British pound. So you can see China from 2,100 to 5,530, and the United Kingdom from 669 to 789 pound. In both cases, we see some sort of a positive trend. Although for China, we can see it's actually an increase of about 200% compared to 2008 and 2013. And if you look at the United Kingdom, the increase in the demand, or the retail value, I should better say, is much smaller. So both of them have a positive trend, but in China, it seems the demand for tea, or the retail value for tea, increased substantially. Now, of course, you might say, hang on a minute, the retail value is not representative for the amount of tea that's consumed. And in particular, we want to know how much tea is consumed per person. So at the moment, it looks like in China, the retail values are much higher than those in the United Kingdom. And one reason for that is obviously that China is much larger. And what we actually want to know is how much tea is consumed, or how much tea is retailed per person, because that's a much more accurate number. So again, we go to convert data, and this time we don't want to change the currency, but we want to change the numbers themselves. We want to create a ratio. In this case, we go to per capita or household, and we click on per capita. Now the per capita value is basically the per person value. So it's actually considering the population of each country and then recalculates the value per person. So you can see actually in China, people consume less tea compared to the United Kingdom. It really depends on what you want to know and to understand what these scores actually mean in context. So is it necessary to know the retail value per capita, or is it more important to know how much tea in total is sold in a country, irrespective of the price, irrespective of how much tea is consumed per person? And sometimes you need some sort of data about populations. Now, in case of the tea example, GMID actually provided a calculation for accounting for the population in order to find out how much tea is consumed per person. However, sometimes you don't have this additional information, or you actually need other types of information, such as economic data. And one very good source that's freely accessible is the OECD database. So this is now the OECD statistics website, which includes a large amount of data, not everything. You can actually go to the OECD iLibrary, but you would have to be a subscriber. So it's depending on whether the university has subscribed to it. But for your purposes, for your report, the online version is more than you will actually need. So you can see here are different categories. general statistics, agriculture, demography, and population. As a little hint for the assignment of next week, you actually also find something about globalization. So that might be helpful for your assignment. A little hint here. But for now, we just click on demography, population statistics, and population. Because, for example, we want to know how did the population grow in the last years. This might be, for example, important if you want to find out whether or not there is a market for baby food, right? So if you have baby food that you sell in a certain country, you probably want to know how is the population changing over time. If there's an increase in population, well then, obviously, there have been more babies being born in each of the years, so the population was growing constantly. If there's a decline in the population, then probably it's not such an attractive market. But again, this is just one of the key ratios that you could look at, one piece of information that will inform your final decision, but it should certainly not be the only one. Now we can go to customize selection and country. So let's say we want to look at the UK and China again. And first of all, unselect all of these. And we click on the United Kingdom. So we have to scroll down a little bit. United Kingdom. And then here we have China. And say view data. And suddenly we only have the data for the United Kingdom and China. And in both cases, we can see that actually the number of people in this country, living in this country, increased quite a bit for both countries. Okay, as a final exercise, I want you to take your computer and do a little analysis yourself by trying to answer who is the market leader in selling mobile phones. In particular in the UK, China, Italy, Switzerland, and the United States. So feel free to stop this video right now and go ahead and try to find the answer to this question. Now I hope you managed to find the answer to this particular exercise and got the answers for the UK, China, Italy, Switzerland, and the US. If you had troubles to find it, I will now show you how you could find it. So you would have started off here in the GMID and you would have clicked on search. And this time, of course, we don't select hot drinks because we're not interested in hot drinks at all. This time we are interested in consumer electronics. So we need to find consumer electronics, which is right here. And we click on this little plus icon. Mobile phones are portable consumer electronics. So we need to open up this category. And then we finally find mobile phones. Next, we choose the countries that we want to compare. So in this case, we have China, which is Asia Pacific. Then we have Western Europe, where we want to have Italy, Switzerland, United Kingdom. And then, of course, we have North America, because we also want to include the United States. So we've got mobile phones here, and our geography summary says we have these 5 countries selected. And now we're ready to go. We just click on Run Search. And again, we get a plethora of different reports. You can also see here that we actually have different reports for mobile phones in these countries, which might be helpful to get more detailed information. But for this exercise, all we want to know is the company shares. Now, the company shares are a little bit different to brand shares. The brand shares are referring to a specific brand. So this might be the iPhone, the iPad, the Samsung Galaxy S4, compared to the company shares. The company shares refer to the whole company, and a company might have different brands. Just think back about Unilever, the webpage. Of course, Unilever has different products and they're all branded in a different way. So in order to find out who are the biggest competitors or the biggest market players in a specific country, we click on company shares. And what we see here first is the results for China. And it might be surprising or not that actually Samsung is the big market leader, holding 22% of the market share. Then we have Lenovo Group, and then we have Huawei Technologies, who are ranked as number 3. So you might be wondering, oh, where's actually Apple? Well, for Apple, we have to go down to here. They are actually even behind Nokia in terms of market share. They only hold 4.5% of the market compared to 22% of Samsung. Now let's have a look at the US. How is the situation like in the US? And if we look at the United States, suddenly the picture changes slightly. We have almost 30% of the market is taken by Apple, while Samsung occupies 26%. So actually fairly close to each other. But in this case, in this country, Apple is the leader. And number 3, we find LG Corporations. Now it's probably less surprising that Apple is on top of the US because the domestic market for Apple is, of course, the American market. Let's have a look at Italy. Now in Italy, we find a similar picture to China actually. Samsung is again on top, and not just on top, they are quite a lot on top. They have almost 44% of the market compared to Nokia, which holds 21%, and Apple only around 14% of the market. So Samsung is a really, really strong competitor in terms of mobile phones in Italy. Let's have a look at the United Kingdom. And here we also find that Samsung is actually on top with 34% of the market compared to Apple. Apple again, just around 20% here. And last but not least, we have Nokia and BlackBerry, who ranges on rank number 3 and 4. So overall, we can see that actually Apple is not having such a huge footprint in terms of mobile phones in different countries. Actually, most of the time, Samsung is actually the market leader in these countries. Now, last but not least, I want to shortly talk about where to find information about culture. And there are at least 3 different sources that you can draw on. On the one hand, you have, of course, the Gethofstede website. And be aware, there are many different Gethofstede websites, some of which are providing actually a little bit faulty information. And it's also a little bit misleading. So the one that I recommend is the official Gethofstede website with the official scores, which you can find here, data available here. If you click on it, you get to this website, and here you can download under the data is used in our books, 6 dimensions for website XLS. So this is the file that you would like to download, and you get actually a nice Excel spreadsheet with the different scores for each of the dimensions of the Hofstede questionnaire. Apart from that, there's also a book called or related to the Globe study, which you can find in the university library. This one includes also, similar to the Gerrit Hofstede data, scores for different dimensions for different countries. They also have clustered certain regions together because they culturally are close to each other. So this might be another source of information that you would like to draw on in order to analyze the cultural environment of a society or a country in general. Last but not least, there's also the World Values Survey database. The World Values Survey is actually quite a huge empirical study that collects a lot of information for each country. I would even go as far as to say the World Values Survey has very representative data for each country. So let's have a quick look at this database too. If you click on it, you come to the landing page of the World Values Survey, and the data you can find under Data and Documentation. You can either download the full data sets, or you can also run an online analysis, which for the sake of this demonstration, I will click on. And you will see you can choose from different waves. So they started collecting data back in 1981 until today. So you can see it's a really rich database. And similar to the GMID, you can actually select different countries. Now you can see, compared to the GMID, there is only a very small selection of countries available, depending on what you consider as small, but it's of course not as exhaustive, this list of countries, as you would find it with the GMID database. So let's say I click on Spain, I click on Russia, I click on Kazakhstan, and then we can click on Next and choose questions from the survey. So you can see there are questions about what is important in your life: family, friends, leisure time, politics, religion, feeling of happiness, what's important in terms of your kids, and so forth. So there are a lot of different questions and probably worth exploring anyway, because I think there is a lot of interesting information in it, such as which country is the most happiest one, and you actually have a question here. But let's say in which country people say friends are very, very important in life. And now you can compare the responses. So if I select the first two rows, you can see they are actually fairly similar. However, if you look very closely, in Spain, people think friends are much more important than people in Russia or people in Kazakhstan think. So this is kind of a huge difference in here. So these are the kind of questions that you could ask with the help of the World Values Survey. Whether or not this makes sense for your assignment is completely up to you. Of course, there are many other questions in this survey that might or might not be helpful for you to extend your analysis with respect to cultural differences and value perceptions in societies. Okay, I hope you found this tutorial helpful, or at least a good starting point for your analysis. There are certainly way more different databases available that you can draw on. Of course, you can also look at newspapers, online blogs, and so forth. It's completely up to you. However, something that you should always keep in mind is this a good source of information? Can I trust this source of information? And apart from that, always make sure that you're not only selecting one source of information and blindly rely on this source, because even though it might be a highly reliable source, there's probably some other information out there in the web or in the library or in different databases that might tell you a different story, or at least enhance the level of detail for your analysis. So please let me know if you have any further questions or if anything is unclear about your group work. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you next time in class.